Thanks all for coming today. My name's John Poulos, graduated from here with a BS in '83. I went to the UCLA Anderson Business School for an MBA. I had the good fortune when I graduated to have a not such a great job market, and so I went with a small biotech startup. Worked there for a couple of years. That headed south. I went to work for another small biotech startup. That started heading south, and I was a glutton for punishment, so I went to work for a third biotech startup, and that was called Amgen. So that did pretty well. I was about the 250th employee or so, and it changed many, many times. I was fortunate enough to be able to retire a few years back from Amgen, and now I look at a lot of small companies. I'm part of what's called an angel investment network, and we look at small startups, and we get to spelunk through their inner workings and determine if somebody should finance them. So I've seen the inner workings of a lot of startups, and had the difficult job of telling various CEOs of little startups why they're not going to get any funding, and why their probability for success is rather low. And I also am actively invested in a few businesses, including a few wineries too, which I can't recommend to anyone for making money, but it's certainly a lot of fun. So I wanted to somehow share my experience and give you all a tool you could use, or somewhat of a lens that you could gain some perspective when you go out and look out there in the world as an investor, as a potential employee, as somebody who might be on the other side starting up a company and have people looking at you. And I wanted to create some dimensions that you could kind of look at things through so you can have an idea, because startups will eat your brain. It can be a lot of fun, but I've seen a lot of relationships and a lot of people suffer under them as well. So I think from a startup you can expect three things. You're going to get an adventure, you're going to get an experience. If you're willing to commit, because you can't do this sort of thing halfway, you got to jump in, and it could be a great experience that you can then leverage to other things. No matter what happens, you can always leverage it to something else. You're going to meet a lot of great people, you're going to make a lot of good connections, you're going to work in close proximity with people. If you're a very, very private person, I wouldn't recommend you go to a startup, because everybody knows everything about everybody else's life. And you might be able to make money, but you also will certainly learn whatever happens financially, you'll get something out of it. So I think one of the most important things is, as someone new in your career, you can't really interrogate anyone. My suggestion is to look around, talk to people, and manage your expectations. A startup isn't perfect. If it was perfect, it wouldn't be a startup. And again, they can't answer all your questions. The post office can, because they're a government agency, but so don't ask too many. And if you expect it to be perfect, it's not a startup. And if you don't want any risk, you're in the wrong place as well. Like if you ask about a career path and a job development function and things like that, forget that. So here's sort of the general eight areas you can look at: management, the culture, the energy, the facilities, the customer. How well is the company positioned to have some hope of making money? Who's invested? Who are the fools now that are invested? Do they have any hope of getting any more financing after that? And do the finances make any sense at all? I'm basing everything here on my experience, and I can defend anything I'm saying. I just won't name any names, because there's probably some people out there on the web that know I'm talking about them as well. So first off, I think that this is number one, because the most important thing is you invest in people, and the management is the most important thing of all. And that is, where did they come from? It's a really good thing if they came from other entrepreneurial companies, other startups. Even if the startup didn't make it, that's a good thing, because they're already sort of in that mode. Or are they intrapreneurs? And you can be a startup in a big company. You can be an intrapreneur in a big company. So I think a lot of what we're saying here today applies to a larger company too. If you're in a part of a larger company, you have a little freedom to operate, and you can start a function. I was fortunate at Amgen to start a small engineering services function that then grew, amongst other things. I think also the management should really have a sense of urgency of what really needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and how they're going to get it done. Those are good things. Sometimes, though, if you get a company where you have a management from large bureaucracies, such as government labs, and I have more than enough personal experience with that, they have a very different sort of pace of business and a very different methodology, which is not necessarily well suited to a startup environment, unless they're ready to tell you that they've come to Jesus and they're ready to toss that out aside and can get their job done. Sometimes technical specialists are not the leaders, and that's something I have to have a lot of kind of difficult discussions with CEOs of small companies that are based around technology. Are they willing to replace themselves? I don't think as a job candidate you can really ask them that, but as a potential investor I can. And I think be confused, be concerned if you really don't see them managing through the chaos, if you don't see them enjoying the chaos and swimming in it and having a good time, if they want to, walk you through a long PowerPoint presentation about something that doesn't make sense either, if they throw out too much technical jargon and obfuscate things, that's particularly in the investment community, that's something we just can't stand. We're always going after that. And if they have like optimism that just doesn't make any sense, it's just you got to come out there more. It's more about a feeling than logic. You got to come out there that like these people are optimistic, but in a rational way, not an irrational way. Culture and energy, I think that's number 2, because you don't want really narrow job descriptions, and you also want a culture, ideally, where they're ready to willing to share equity through stock options or some type of an agreement that allow you to participate in the ownership of the company. And I had, the first 2 places I worked with had stock options too that weren't worth the paper they were printed on, but occasionally they get worth something. Beware of long-winded explanations. Some people call that Occam's razor. Have you ever heard that term? But I can't stand it. Get to the point. Beware of people like that. And I find myself, because I have a very short attention span, looking for the fast forward button all too often, and I have to probably be more patient about that. And I want to hear a sense of urgency. I want to hear how they want to get things done, why they want to get things done in a hurry, and I don't want to hear a long list of the degrees and who is their advisor and all that kind of crap, stuff like that. Lengthy job descriptions are more, for an entrepreneur, are more of sort of a confinement than an opportunity. And if you're at a company that only provides equity for the higher-ups, I would get really, really concerned. And I had the good fortune of, early in my career, worked for a really, really great engineer. He went for a startup where he didn't get equity, and I retired at 44 years old, and he's still working. So, facilities. If it's a technology company, you should see that technology there. It should be more important. When I came to Amgen, they had these beautiful like Beckman centrifuges and nice lab equipment, and sometimes it was in the hall. Probably pushing fire code regulations a little bit, but they bought the best equipment they could. Offices were something people shared offices, and that was really a second thought. And I thought that was really impressive. Also, how they get their facilities. Do they partner with other companies? Do they partner with universities? Do they share equipment? I think that can be very, very useful, particularly in an incubator environment. You see some of that too. That's a good thing. Beware of the fancy office. I can think of one startup in particular that did that, and well-dressed executives who stay in them. I worked for one of those once. And I don't think that's really so good. Particularly, you want management. The good news and the bad news of a startup is the management's going to be intimately involved in your work. You don't want managers to sit upstairs in their fancy clothes all the time. They're going to come down there. They're going to go through your lab book, and they want to know. And that's a good thing. If it looks so neat that no one works with them, be concerned too. Or if it's like Geppetto's workshop and it's just too messy and chaotic, and often there are people that just can't get anything done, and you don't want that sort of thing too. So then, do they know who the customer is? Are they working? Michael's brought up some good points about the customer. Are they building something that people really, really want? Like I don't think anybody really wants that particular fuel truck there, but it is a nice engineering exercise, nevertheless. Do they know who the customer is? Do they understand that? It's great if the people in the startup were part of organizations that were the customer. They understood the need, and they also have the connections. And just be a dumb farmer. Ask somebody and say, why would one of your customers buy this? Or why would one of your customers want this service? Why would somebody want to invest here? If somebody can't explain it in less than like 15 seconds, I'd start walking the other way. They have to really have a readily identifiable customer. First place I went to didn't, and they had a fallback position. They started to sell contract research, which is actually a pretty good field if you've got a customer focus, but they didn't have a customer focus to begin with, and they jumped into contract research without a customer focus, and were out of business within 9 months or so. A lot of technology companies have a strong technical background, but perhaps they're doing it just for technology's sake. Always look for that, a solution looking for a problem. There's a few of those around it too. Question, you can all jump in here. Any questions? Does it make any sense? Is it believable? Alrighty. Barriers to entry. Right now in the internet age, anybody can do anything. You can do things so fast, and companies can do so fast. I look at a lot of internet startup companies, and of course our question is always, well, why doesn't Google just do that? Google could push together 4 desks, and they could do what your whole company wants to do with all this financing. So, understand, do they have some patents or proprietary knowledge, or clearly articulate other advantages. One place I went with said that their advantage was that they had the best scientists around and they were really smart fellows. And that didn't work too well either. Patents are important. They're not everything. Just ask. Secret sauces, key relationships, lone mad scientists, you've seen that too. You don't want too much reliance on a patent, because a patent just gives you the right to chase somebody down the road that's stolen your idea, and maybe you'll catch them, maybe you won't. Some startups are royalty mills for somebody that developed the technology or a scientist that's there, and that's a good basic question to ask, because they tend to fall in two categories. The better ones tend to pay back royalties from sales or after a liquidation event or the company's made some success. The ones I don't like are already burdened from day one with royalty payments and milestone payments and things like that. You got to worry about that. Secondarily, or lastly, who are the consultants? One startup I was with had some famous professors that were consultants, and essentially were making a lot of money when I'd call them up and ask a question. I didn't know it, but they were hitting the cash register, and they'd visit now and then too. But it was really a good deal for them to make a lot of money. But you just got to beware. If the consultants are paid in equity, good. If the consultants are paid in cash, in a cash-strapped company, be really worried. Who the heck is invested in this? You can just ask somebody, say, who are your current investors? Why would somebody invest in this? Friends, family, and fools are the first people. But is the management invested? Have they put money in? Not did they leave their cushy job at GM to go start at this startup, but did they actually put some of their own money in? That speaks tremendously. Also, are the investors from the same industry or even customers? I mean, Google is famous for seeding some little companies with small investments. 20 years ago, you didn't see so much of that, but in this day and age, you see potential acquirers of a company being early stage investors as well.